Hi, everyone. I'm George Jackson, Director of Events at GovExec, here with Christy Carroll, Solutions Architect at McAfee. Christy, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
And thanks to McAfee for being a Marketplace Showcase Plus sponsor of this year's GovForward Multi-Cloud Series, Fedramp Policy and Marketplace Update event. The title of our session here is Evolving Agencies' Threat Detection and Response with Targeted Insight and Intelligence, McAfee, and Why Fedramp Matters. So, Christy, let's start there. Why is Fedramp so important for enabling cloud services and applications for the federal government?
You know, that's a great question. When we start talking about FedRAMP and certifications, when you talk about all of these different things, it could get a little bit confusing. And at first glance, FedRAMP actually may just seem like a type of an on-ramp for the interstate headed for the federal government. In a way, it kind of is, right? When we think about what FedRAMP is, it's a risk and authorization management program. So it basically provides a standard security assessment, authorization, and continuous monitoring for cloud products and services to be used by federal agencies. So when we think about what that product and program mission is, it's actually to protect the data of US citizens when we're dealing with cloud and the promotion of and adoption of these secure cloud services across the government with what we call a standardized approach. So all of the different capabilities are standardized and you know you're secure with your cloud services. So let's go back to that interstate analogy, right? When you think about getting on that on-ramp, you're kind of heading in all the same direction. But you know, when we think about this, a cloud service, once it's actually been successfully on the on-ramp and in FedRAMP, it's actually allowed to be used by all the different agencies and listed in that FedRAMP marketplace. You know, the FedRAMP marketplace is actually a one-stop shop for agencies to find all these different cloud services. And they've all been tested and approved safe for use, making it much easier to determine if an offering meets some sort of a security requirement. You know, this is important because it gives agencies the ability to have a common set of standards for their cloud providers, and it actually empowers our agencies to use modern cloud technology. So, you know, nothing antiquated, we're going to the latest and greatest with an emphasis on security and protection. And we know that we want to protect our data. And so we're looking at that federal information, helping accelerate the adoption of these cloud services. And I want to pull up one more point. So here at McAfee, we're actually really dedicated to making sure our cloud services are compliant with FedRAMP standards. And we've put a really large investment in FedRAMP for our mVision Cloud and mVision Endpoint capabilities. It includes our EDR, EPO, ENS, ATP platforms. And when we think about this, when we talk about the mVision Cloud, we're actually FedRAMP High. So it's an IL5. And we were the first CASB to be granted IL5 for this capability. And then our mVision Endpoint is actually FedRAMP Moderate or IL2. And when we think about being FedRAMPed, it actually means that McAfee solutions have actually passed these really rigorous security requirement tests. And it helps you protect and expand cloud environments for the US government. So that's kind of why FedRAMP matters. It's kind of important.
You mentioned EDR. I'm hoping to talk a little bit about that later, but I want to pull on a couple of threads that you raised in your answer there. You know, you talked about protecting the data of citizens. You talked about this emphasis on security and protection. I mean, back in May, President Biden signed the executive order for improving the nation's cybersecurity. What do agencies, what do organizations need to meet what was outlined in that critically important document?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. And when if you got your hands on that executive order, it's really long and there's a lot of information in it. But we've kind of picked out a few things and it outlines a few areas where we feel that we as McAfee can help. There's actually three main points that we're looking towards. You know, we start talking about things like threat intelligence sharing, zero trust architecture, as well as improving and advancing detection for cybersecurity vulnerabilities and some of those incidents that we're seeing in the gig networks. You know, so we'll actually touch on each one of those topics. And that first one is threat intelligence sharing. And we actually, think it's really important from McAfee's perspective. We have several partners and multiple threat feeds that can help agencies. And we've actually been practicing an open architecture for over a decade now, which actually makes threat sharing with our capabilities and third parties really, really easy to work with. As for the next one, which is our zero trust architecture, we actually have capabilities to help implement that architecture, which include cloud and container security with our UCE, which is Unified Cloud Edge, and CASB capabilities as well. It's actually award-winning. You can see some of my awards behind me in my wall. And then lastly, when we're improving and advancing the detection, we're really calling out our Envision EDR. And hopefully you'll ask me some questions to get into that one, but McAfee has a cloud-based Fedramped EDR tool, which can actually help reduce the time to detect and respond if threats come into your environment. And then we can also help you prioritize your risky systems and then even prescribe some mitigations around that. So, this in turn can actually help really quickly reduce that threat landscape in a lot of environments.
That's great. Most federal agencies have endpoint security or an endpoint security solution to some degree, but I've been hearing a lot about a phrase called advanced endpoint platforms. Tell us what that means to McAfee, to you, and maybe how those platforms potentially can help agencies expand their security.
Yeah, sure. So, McAfee has been committed to the endpoint space in the public sector actually for a really long time. And with us achieving that FedRAMP certification for Envision Endpoint, it's actually something we're really proud of. The endpoint protection consists of three primary components. It's our EDR, our Envision EPO capability, as well as our endpoint security, including the adaptive threat protection, which has Real Protect, which is our machine learning functionality. When we talk about EDR, it actually simplifies some investigations that we can do and how we can respond to sophisticated threat campaigns. And, we actually have a unified detection and response capability, but we also have continuous monitoring, multi-sensor telemetry, AI guided, so artificial intelligence guided investigations, Mitre attack mappings, right? So there's a ton of things that we have involved here. And then even some real-time hunting that we're able to provide with that tool, all in one platform. And then we have the Envision EPO, which actually provides a cloud-native single pane of glass. It's a single console that actually helps manage both McAfee and third-party security tools, which is something that a lot of security vendors don't actually do, is map to some of those third-party capabilities. And then we also have automation of workflows and then even prioritizing risk assessments, which can help triage things, investigations, and help respond to security incidents. And then when we get back to that advanced endpoint function that you were talking about and that kind of terminology, we actually have our ENS ATP, which is a ability for us to prevent advanced malware. And it helps us from being infected at the endpoint. And we have our next generation antivirus capabilities. And there's a couple things in there that I think are really important to mention, because a lot of people, they look at McAfee, they say, hey, you've been around for 30 years, you're the elephant in the room. But we have that 30 years of experience, and we're able to use that to create algorithms that help us find the next gen malware piece, right? So anything from behavioral blocking, exploit prevention, and even that machine learning functionality that can help us stop those fileless threat defenses. Even if we think back to this past weekend, right, a ton of stuff has happened in the news in cybersecurity with all the ransomware attacks that have been actually happening in the news. A number of businesses have been hit. I want to share a little tidbit about McAfee's ENS platform that's actually unique about us and how we can help block or actually even diminish the impact of an attack with something called a remediation capability that we have. So let's say a company gets hit with ransomware, we can actually roll back that destructive effect of ransomware by restoring those affected files. And then even sometimes negating the need for a system reimage, which helps so much in keeping everybody up and working, and also will help keep that company from, or agency from the front of the Washington Post. So, it's important to understand that we are trying to help not only with our endpoint AV capabilities, advanced threat detection capabilities, and EDR, but then also helping with some guided investigations, detections, and then response capabilities that we have. And then bringing it full circle back to that FedRAMP requirement, and having that milestone to affirm that McAfee is committed to providing that US government agencies an advanced cloud-centric cyber defense to help them with whatever mission they're needing to meet.
It's very timely, relevant thoughts right there too. Thanks for that, Christy. In the past, EDR, as you mentioned, endpoint detection and response, these capabilities a lot more complex than they are today. They needed senior analysts, maybe a team of senior analysts to run them. How are these relatively new technologies, some that you alluded to there, but I'm thinking machine learning, I'm thinking artificial intelligence, how are they impacting the complexity that we're talking about here?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I remember years ago when I was actually working in a SOC myself, and it was those senior analysts that were the ones that you needed to run those tools. It was a common consensus that it was really hard. You had to have an idea of which systems needed to be investigated. And you needed to know what to look at or even kind of where to look. And most likely the root cause of an incident wasn't obvious, right? So at this point, analysts needed to step outside of that EDR solution. They had other tools they needed to use to do the investigations. And then there's a ton of different things they had to understand to actually look at these complex threats, campaigns, and any risks that are actually associated with that campaign. So with mVision EDR, one of the things that we're able to do is, analysts at any level can actually take the next step to investigate, because EDR or our mVision EDR guides them through that investigation, asking targeted questions based on what we're seeing. And then we can provide those analysts with a dynamic capability to adjust to the case at hand, right? So if a new threat pops up, we prioritize it to the top of the list and helps them move through utilizing some of that artificial intelligence, understanding what we're looking for, and then we're able to combine even different investigations and strategies to help find it. So it makes it a whole lot easier for us, not requiring those senior, very, very, advanced analysts to come through. We can use analysts at any level to help actually walk through by using these guided investigations.
Okay. What about threat sharing? What about targeted risk intelligence? What's state of the art for federal agencies in those areas?
Yeah, actually, threat sharing is kind of near and dear to my heart. This is one of the reasons why I've loved working at McAfee, is that dedication to third-party threat sharing. And there are a number of third-party intelligence services out there. One of them is ours. We call it Global Threat Intelligence, or GTI. And it can actually increase the effectiveness of endpoint security, partly because we're able to provide immediate threat intelligence directly to the endpoint before it's even published into a DAT or a signature of some sort. Threat intelligence services actually provide an organization with, a global pool of information about threats and characteristics. And then we're able to actually use that collective intelligence and help increase that EDR's capability to identify and exploit using that artificial intelligence as well. We have multi-layers of functions that we're able to apply, helping stop those zero-day attacks or even find them, right, and help you move past them. We also include our threat intelligence from GTI into our EDR platform, not as an add-on, so not as an upsell, but included from the get-go to help keep everybody secure. Now, another way that we're actually doing this is integration with mVision Insights. And this is a tool that McAfee has, which I like to kind of explain through a scenario. And I think it's important to understand it through this. We'll think of it as I was working in a SOC, I'm a senior admin, and I oversee the system of my environments. And my CISO comes to me and says, hey, how truly protected are we against those latest threats and campaigns that are actually facing, whether it's the federal government or whether it's a financial vertical? Well, in the past, organizations couldn't answer that question. They didn't really know. So, we didn't know we were vulnerable until something was actually weaponized and the threats were materialized right into our environment. And then we were scrambling to take action with no prescriptive guideline. But with mVision Insights, what's really cool about this is it breaks that old paradigm and allows those security defenders to get ahead of the threat by solving 3 different use cases. So again, I'm that senior admin and I don't know how to prioritize. Well, with Insights, I can actually proactively advise on attacks that matter based on my particular industry and what I'm seeing. So that's number one. It could even be by geography, right? McAfee has over 1 billion sensors out there. We use AI to actually prioritize those threats for you. And then we're able to curate that using our ATR team and then informing our customers what they should look at first. I think that's pretty cool that we can do that. We also have some predictive assessments for security posture. So with insights, we can actually give a security score. Hey, we think you're doing really good, or hey, you probably should focus your attention over here because you're not doing so good. And that helps because we can prepare our customers to focus their attention as opposed to scrambling at the end. And then the last of those three components is actually a prescription of security actions. So based on what we know about your environment, we're able to prescribe a specific security posture action for you to actually stop an attack before it even hits. So we're saying, hey, we're taking that guesswork out of, the SOC when they're actually scrambling under duress to try and find something. So it's some pretty cool stuff that we're able to do. And then one last point that I do want to bring up, which I think is kind of all over cybersecurity and endpoint capabilities today, is that Mitre attack framework. It actually categorizes cyber threats by a number of different factors, and we take them all into consideration. We think it's an important framework to follow, but we look at things like tactics used on a system, types of vulnerabilities exploited, and even malware tools that were used. Criminal groups that can be associated with an attack often use identifying patterns, and we use that artificial intelligence to help us find those, even if there's minor changes in an exploit. These details can actually help us find this prior to it even being a known threat, because they're kind of following their own modus operandi, right? They're following that same capability. So as security professionals, a ton of things are coming in. There's complex cyber threats, greater diversity in the number of types of endpoints that they have, whether it's Windows, Macs, Linux, handheld mobile devices. You look down at your desk, you probably got your phone and your iPad sitting in front of you as well. But what we're able to do is we're able to use all of that information and telemetry to pull it in and then guide that investigation and analysis, and then even take response with our mVision EDR. So it's some really cool stuff that we can do. The integration, not only with those third-party threat feeds, pulling the information using artificial intelligence, and then even just prescribing actions to our customers that make it a really smooth transition into stopping those cyber threats.
And I'll note that in your background behind you, Christy, your evangelist for the Mitre attack approach is also evident there. So
Yep.
Real fan there. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about process. We've talked about technology. I don't want to give short shrift to people. So maybe we focus there for just a minute or two. Staffing can be a perpetual challenge for many agencies. Talk about industry's role. Like, how can industry help these organizations move toward a more cloud native SaaS suite of services? Some of the stuff that you've highlighted here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about running previous networks, and I will say my background is in network and engineering, it was going into a server room, having a big stack of servers in a rack. And then anytime a software patch came out, you had to scurry to get yourself up to the latest and greatest version. When you start talking about how you can take that focus of the tool maintenance away from your very skilled security analysts, they can start focusing on strategic defense instead. So a cloud-based deployment provides them the ability to do that. McAfee made a commitment years ago to be cloud first and cloud ready. And we're actually showing this through our SaaS-based security portfolio that we have today. We have things such as our mVision Cloud, again, that award-winning CASB capability. We also have mVision EDR, mVision EPO, mVision Endpoint, and we'll be continuing to add to our SaaS stack. We talk about the EDR, which again was a primary focus of mine today. It's near and dear to my heart. It's available as software as a service application. So the management is through EPO. And then also all of the background and all of the updates and all of the hardware is managed in that SaaS capability. So we take care of, taking off the tool maintenance functionality, allowing your analysts to really focus on the threats at hand versus having them to have to constantly scurry to get the latest and greatest in updates and patches. So we're simplifying deployment, that ongoing maintenance, and helping EDR secure your entire security infrastructure.
Christy, I wish we could go on for another 20 minutes. I just want to thank you for being here today. Everybody's so busy. Just thanks for taking time out of your busy day.
Hey, it was my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Anytime you want me to come back, I probably can talk for another 20 minutes about another topic. So thank you.
You got it. And thanks again to McAfee for being a Marketplace Showcase Plus sponsor for this year's GovForward event. To our audience, please spend some more time in McAfee's Resource Hub, review their supportive materials. There's just a ton of great info here. For GovExec, I'm George Jackson.